Hi, everyone. My name is Rashida Young. I am from New Jersey. I could not be there with you all, so instead, I've put together a virtual presentation. So, thank you very much for your attention, and let's go ahead and get started. So, first thing I'm going to do is I am going to share my screen. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Positioning Radical Love to Foster Transformative Language Identities, the Multilingual Classroom, or simply put, Ubuntu. So the topic has expanded from our initial submission to include multilingualism, and then Ubuntu, which is a concept that I learned as a Fulbright Hayes Fellow when I studied in South Africa this summer. And so Ubuntu essentially means I am because you are, that I see you. And so when you say, um, like a combination of Sawubona, I see you. Ubuntu is I am because you are. I recognize the humanity in you. And that simply is how I approach teaching, by recognizing the humanity in my students. So I thought first, let's ground ourselves in what love actually is, at least for me, according to James Baldwin. So love takes off the mask that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. I use the word love here not merely on in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace, not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring growth. And so my presentation is asking us together to grow, to confront parts of ourselves that we try to, or that we ignore, parts of ourselves that we say do not exist. But love, it takes off that mask and it asks us to look at the ugly parts that we may not necessarily want to deal with. And so it's important for you to know who I am. This is my daughter, Amaz, and my son, Malik. And that was on the evening before I left for South Africa. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So in 2020, I was completely angry. Like I was really angry with everything that was going on. And I had resolved to myself that to be Black and conscious is to be in a constant state. Well, to be Black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. And I was enraged, and rightfully so. I mean, how my life felt in academia is one of the things that everyone, mm, let's see. So, first the anger, and then how my life felt in academia. And it's because of how my life felt in academia that is what brought me to this work. And so, imagine this picture was taken when this young lady, I forget her name, it escapes me at the present moment, when she tried to integrate the school system. So notice this very welcoming face. And sorry, let's go back. And so that welcoming face, this is how I felt in academia. I felt like The women that are standing around looking at her with this scowl is how I felt in academia, right? And I've been doing this for 23 years, and it's a feeling that's like, at times it can be very oppressive and smothering. And at one point, and in 2020, I was 2 seconds away from exiting. And then how my life felt as a mother and as an auntie in 2020. So in 2020, we had the brutal shooting of Ahmaud Arbery when he was just running in a neighborhood and, was shot down. Tamir Rice, the verdict came back that the police officer who shot him in a playground not too far from his home was rendered that the police officer was not guilty. And so I have two sons. Well, I don't have two sons. I have one son. I call him my bonus baby. So this is my son and my nephew. And so here, I want you to follow the cursor. So I saw my son, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamir Rice, and then also my nephew. And if you look at his eyes, you see who he's looking up to. And could you just imagine what life would have been like, or what life would be like for my nephew without my son? And how my life felt as a Black woman and as a Black mother. So normally I give trigger warnings, but I didn't want to give a trigger warning because I want you to feel how I felt. And so this man, so Dave, David Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, his knee is on George Floyd's neck, and George Floyd was begging for his mother. And then in 1930, almost 100 years after, I'm sorry, 100 years before George Floyd incident, this man looks into the camera with the same eyes as Derek Chauvin. And so these eyes are almost daring, like anyone to do anything. And if we notice these two bodies here, you know, they were accused of raping and burglarizing a woman. Um, and I'm sorry, this couple, which we know to be absolutely false because Black people were terrorized, were living in terror of even being in the same vicinity as a white person because what a white person could allege that they would do. So historically and statistically speaking, Black people actually have much more, and at present still have much more to lose at times by being alone with some people who do not look like us. And so, in response to George Floyd, what did my daughter and I do? We went to a rally and we protested. Now, we can still tell that it's 2020 because folk are still out there wearing masks. And then my daughter, I wrote about this in my autoethnography. My daughter wrote, All Lives Matter. Um, I thought and this is a curse word. And I'm like, Maz, you can't say that. And she's like, watch me. And she was angry. And so, right, very rightfully so. And so, why did I spend time building the context? Because I think it's important. And it's important, and as well as my dissertation explores what life felt like and feels like as a Black woman, as a Black mother, and as a Black professor, and how the triangulation of those identities affect my teaching practice. All right. So, what are some of the scholarship that I borrow from? So, particularly Bell Hooks. where she talks about, and this is in her text, Love, where she talks about, hey, listen, we got to be true. And that when we reveal ourselves to our students, this brings healing and important discovery. That intimate relationship can provide a sanctuary. So, the sanctuary between the teacher, the student, as being the sanctuary, as being a cover. And when we remove the mask, we are also revealing ourselves to our students. And then we are also creating a sacred place where they too can remove their mask. So, at the foundation of my teaching practice, 100% is honesty and love. I also borrow from Dr. April Baker Bell from the University of Michigan and her idea for linguistic justice, and that we must give our students the opportunity to leverage their first language, which for Black Americans is African American Vernacular English or Black English, and allowing our students and our multilingual students to use some of their home language and integrate that into their text as appropriate. I also borrow from Goldie Muhammad's Cultivating Genius, where she breaks down a successful lesson around 4 to 5 crucial elements, such that our assignments should ask our students to think about their identity. So we are advancing students' knowledge and their affirmation of self and of others. That what's the skill that we're hoping that our lesson is teaching them? And then we want to think about intellect, meaning that we are putting students' knowledge and we're putting it into action. And then also increasing their criticality, their understanding of oppression, equity, and anti racism. And that hopefully we are living in and existing in a place of joy by elevating beautiful and truthful images, representations, and narratives about ourselves and others. And so literacy narratives, autoethnography, what my goal is to help students see themselves and others in a way that challenges maybe a perception that they had that they learned was maybe not accurate. And then what is the joy in learning that? Of course, I borrow Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, the banking concept of education versus problem posing education, and then Yolanda Silly Ruiz and her text on the archaeology of the self and foundation is that we must have a love for the community and for the students in which we are teaching. And then through that love comes a deep humility where we are also developing in critical reflection, having a sense of historical literacy, and then through having that historical literacy, the archaeology of the self is asking the teacher to do some digging about him, her, or themselves. And then Ubuntu, when we put all of those ideas together, essentially what Ubuntu is understanding, consideration, and wearing the shoes of the other person. For example, one of my students who was late all the time, I was like, what is going on with the student? Come to find out that the student was older and was a single parent and had difficulty picking up the child from daycare before coming to class, that we must be honest, must be caring. You got to have elements of self control. So, in my classroom, can we disagree? 100%. But are we going to be disagreeable? Absolutely not. Elements of responsibility. We want to have our students come to class prepared to the best of their ability, that we want to also create citizens that are just not responsible in the classroom, but are also responsible outside of the class, and essential elements of compassion when we put it all together. We want to be humane. We want to offer friendliness. We want to smile to our students. Like a student comes in late, instead of I smile and, you know, um, being flexible. So essentially, Ubuntu, what all of that boils down to is centered in love and compassion, flexibility, and understanding. And so my assignments are based in Ubuntu, are also based in the different foundational texts that I mentioned, because they all contribute to my teaching practice as well as the way in which I design assignments. So, how do I connect Ubuntu to Project One, which is the literacy narrative? And this is from Rutgers University. First thing I do is we start with name story. So I'm going to play a clip for you. So it's important, especially working with multilingual students, that they understand that once they come into my class, they don't have to take on an American name. No, the same way that you learn to speak and write and read in English, I can at least say your name. Now, because I'm not sure you'll be able to hear that, I'm going to disconnect. Okay. That's my full name. It means the road is good. Isn't that a beautiful name? Thanks, Mom. I got it for my birthday. So, Ozamaka. But I grew up in a small New England town, and there weren't a lot of Nigerian Americans living in my region. And I would have teachers or anyone, neighbors, try and say my name, and it would be Azumeka, Uzamaka, Uzokuza, any version that they could think of other than Uzamaka. So I came home from school one day, and my mom was cooking in the kitchen, as she is wont to do, the mother of 5 children. And I said to her, Mommy, can I ask you a question? She said, I said, can you call me Zoe? And she stopped and gave that mother look that only mothers know and have, and said, why? And I said, because no one can say Ozamaka. And she looked at me and she said, if they can learn to say Tchaikovsky and Michelangelo and Dostoevsky, then they can learn to say Ozamaka. Again. And what is amazing now, standing in my womanhood, in my power, is I wouldn't change my name for a second. I'm so proud of that name and what stems behind it and what it represents. So do not ever erase those identifiers that are held in you, whether it's your gap, whether it's your name, whether it's your food. It is yours, and it was given to you at birth, and it is yours to own. And then from there, we go to
My name by Macholen Wa Selepe. Nomgqibelo Namisile Mgqibisa. Look at what they have done to my name, the wonderful name of my great-great-grandmothers. Nomgqibelo Namisile Mgqibisa. The burly bureaucrat was surprised. What he heard was music to his ears. But as I say no fear, I am from Chief Dalukolo Vela Igodle of Emamponweni, and my name is Nomgqibelo Namisile Mgqibisa. Messiah, help me. My name is so simple yet so meaningful, but to this man it is trash. He gives me a name convenient enough to answer his whim. I end up being Mariah. I, Nomgqibelo Namisile Mgqibisa.
And I think those videos, your name story, particularly when you're teaching a multilingual classroom and you're showing them that no, you shouldn't change your name or to fit somebody else's tongue because they have a difficult time saying your name. Instead, I you should that you should make them say your name. This video, for me, reinforces the need, the beauty of a person's name. And so that's the first assignment is unpacking your name. And then I love Sandra Cisneros, my name, that story. I South African, Chicana, being able to bring in different cultures and how each one has experienced some form of discrimination because of their name is important for other multilingual students to see again. So this assignment, when you're unpacking your name, it's my way of building it's my way of building kinship with my students. I do this through COIL. And so we have a COIL project. And when I'm working with some of my international students, and COIL was developed out of the SUNY system. And so by students, we work collaboratively with students who are in South Africa. And that's the methodology where the professors collaborate, lots of collaboration, and then the students also collaborate together. So I want to bring you to, I skipped over a slide as it's not the best for this particular audience. So if you do want to know more about it, just ask Liz DeBetta, and that information can get to me and I'll be more than happy to go over it with you. But for the sake of time, I don't think it's necessary to go over the goals of the collaborative project as much as I want to ground you in how we came up with this project. So, literacy narratives, it helps students become more metacognitive about their learning. They're able to think about their learning and think about their experiences and how those experiences, how they shape them. And then we move into, it helps students integrate their learning about writing into their prior knowledge about writing. So it helps students combine what they have known. So it like activates their background knowledge. And that's something that's important for me. And then scaffolding, it supports their learning. It gives them a solid foundation before moving into other types of writing. And then I love that literacy narratives, it opens a problem space. And again, this goes back to my original position about love, and that love asks us to unmask, love asks us to reveal. And that when you open up a problem space for exploration, what that does, according to Charles Bazerman, is that taking up the challenge of a genre casts you into the problem space and the typified structures and practice of that genre provide the means of a solution. So, in other words, what we're asking our students to do is to take a problem, work through it, you may come into a conclusion, you may not, but being open to explore that space, and that the greater the challenge of the solution, the greater the possibilities of cognitive growth. And I'm going to tell you, when I first started my autoethnography in grad school, and then my literacy narrative when I was going for my master's, the literacy narrative was the most difficult essay that I wrote. And it was difficult because of the emotional labor that I had to tap into in order to produce a good text about how I learned a certain language to survive in the space. And then my autoethnography, dealing with all of that anger that was swirling around me in 2020. I wanted to literally scream. And my professor, Dr. Christina Sanchez Martin, gave me the room to scream through my words. Okay, and then lastly, it asks us to connect research to lived experiences. And what you're going to have some folk for my English people out there who teach composition classes, you're going to have people who say that literacy narrative, autoethnography, they're not rigorous, it's not challenging, not academic. That's not true. Actually, you have to use research in order to substantiate your position. And what is more rigorous than and more transformative than when you are able to borrow from research to help you support your ideas as it connects to your own life and your literacy experiences. I get I get riled up when I start talking about people saying that it's not rigorous. I'm like, for who? Because it sure enough was for me. And then students think through their understanding while analyzing the rhetorical choices of their work. Like it's really important for them to think about different moves that they're going to be making in their writing. And so they have to develop the nuances and the critical thinking to be able to tell and to know when they should use or omit certain rhetorical strategies. And then lastly, autoethnography, it illustrates the value of literacy analysis and in promoting metacognitive knowledge of the writing process. Like you're constantly thinking about your thinking and your growing awareness of the writing process. So the assignment, right? So now that we're here, so what I do is I take some controversial literacy narratives, and I give them to my students. But I give it to them against the backdrop of the C's 1974 Students' Right to Their Own Language. And so, affirming that yes, students have the right to their own patterns, their own varieties, and that language scholars long ago denied the myth of a standard American dialect has any validity. So in 1974, when this was published, you had folk who in the C's who said, listen, enough of it. Let's allow students to leverage their home language into their classroom. And we are still contending with that in 2024. And we're going to be dealing with it for at least the next 4 years. So, our words, our world. I borrowed this essay from Makosasana. Makosasana. Always try to say her name, Tava. And she is a professor from UKZN. And she wrote a text that she wrote and edited this collection of work around Black women in South Africa. And then they also use How to Tame a Wild Tongue, Gloria Anzaldua's. We look at Hines Hall, Macklemore. These are all literacy narratives. We look at NWA's, F the Police. And then we also look at Julius Mulima's Shoot to Kill. Now, protest songs, protest song, protest song are all responses to an unfair system. But if you only focus on the response, you're going to miss the point, right? And the point is that they are responding to oppressive systems, racist systems, and they're challenging it. Same even in How to Tame a Wild Tongue, when people talk about her language as not being legitimate. And then Hines Hall, the language of protest, where you have Macklemore drawing to our awareness, hey, what's happening in Palestine? So my rationale behind this is that each text, Hines Hall, F the Police, Shoot to Kill, it responds to systems of oppression and injustice. So these authors, they challenge their given dehumanized status and the status of marginalized people through song lyrics and through text. As astute cultural critics and griots, they are able to safely articulate the challenges that the racial and politicized landscape present to them. Their literacy narrative imposes a critical stamp on their environment and legitimizes their critique of police brutality, apartheid, the Palestinian war, the Palestinian genocide, South African student protests, and the necessity of student encampments. Their texts take on issues of racial discrimination, linguistic injustice, a mother's tongue, police violence, white supremacy, and the suppression of journalists. And now, to go back to the original slide, James Baldwin, love asks us to remove the mask. Love is going to make us uncomfortable because we have to begin looking at ourselves and our positionality. And then the assignment. I want to show you the assignment because there isn't a way for me to, of course, put it in the chat, but I open up with the bluest eye. And I love this quote for two reasons. And I'll tell you those two reasons after I read it to you. And this is from Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. You looked at them and wondered why they were so ugly. You looked closely and could not find the source. Then you realized that it came from conviction, their conviction. It was as though some mysterious, all knowing master had given each one a cloak of ugliness to wear, and they had each accepted it without question. And so, first reason I like this, number one, who taught you to hate yourself? Number two, who taught you that their self hatred was worthy of you ingesting? And so this connects or digesting. So this connects back to the point that I was making earlier about love. Love asks us to remove the mask. Love asks us to look at ourselves. Love oftentimes will make us uncomfortable. And so when you think about who taught you to hate yourself, who taught you to hate that crooked front tooth, you thought your tooth was fine. Who taught you that your language was ugly when all the while you may have thought your language was fine? And so, similar to the like we use the Maholeng wa Selepe, we use her essay, My Name. We use the C's, student right to their own language, Duduzile, Zaman Tungwa Mabaso, the mother tongue and the poet, where she writes about speaking and writing in isiZulu is easier for her than writing in English, and how some of her language nuances is lost when she has to write in English over isiZulu. Of course, Gloria Anzaldua's How to Tame a Wild Tongue, and Zoe Wickham's Home Sweet Home, Bowl Like Hole, and this is from her text, You Can't Get Lost in Cape Town. So my assignment is asking you, do these writers really have the right to their own language when it makes other people uncomfortable? How would their literacy narrative have changed if they did not have access to non traditional, quote, non standard language to express their ideas? And so, again, Heinz Hall, Beyonce's Formation, NWA's F the Police, and Julius Malima's Shoot to Kill. And, Heinz Hall,
people they won't be. What is threatening about divesting in one piece? The problem isn't the protest, it's what they're protesting. It goes against what our country is funding. Block the barricade until Palestine is free. Block the barricade until Palestine is free. When I was 7, I learned a lesson from Cuban Easy E. What was it again? Oh yeah, fuck the police. There's a badges protecting property in a system that was designed by white supremacy. When the people are in the streets, you can pay off Meta, you can't pay off me. Politicians, sometimes my enemies, they Pat Coopy and all the companies. TV show here around the land of the free, but this generation here is about to cut the spreads. Ban TikTok, take us out the algorithm, but it's too late. We've seen the truth, we bear witness. Seen the rubble of buildings, the mothers and the children, and all the men that you murdered, and then we see how you spin it. Who gets the right to defend and who gets the right of resistance? It's always been about dollars and the color of your pigment. But white supremacy is finally all glass, screaming free Palestine to their home and last. The lies and claiming it's anti-Semitic to the anti-Zion, expecting Jewish brothers and sisters out there and riding in solidarity and screaming free Palestine with them organizing and learning and finally cutting ties with the state that's got to rely on an apartheid system to uphold an occupying violent history been repeated for the last 75. The neck but never ended, the colonizer lie. The students and kids posted on the wall. The law is really against the law. The police in the call and the police in their squad where the genocide land in your definition hot. Destroying every college in Gaza and every mosque. Pushing everyone in the rock and dropping bombs. Blood is on your hands, bright, and we can see it all. And fuck no, I'm not voting for you in the fall. Undecided. You can't twist it. Never be defeated when freedom's on the rise. If the music industry's quiet, complicit in their platform of silence. What happened to the artist? What you gotta say? If I was on a label, you could drop me today. I'll be fine with it because the heart fed my page. I want a ceasefire. Fuck a response from Drake. You were in Gaza. What if those were your kids? If the West was pretending that you didn't exist, you want the world to stand up, and the students finally did. Let's get it.
So my position is that this is his protest song. And so what brought him to this level of awareness? What made him want to put out a text that you have people who would staunchly disagree with, who might label him as being anti Semitic, to now really understanding that there is a similarity between Heinz Hall and NWA's F the Police. We're only going to watch a sample of this.
Take the motherfucking stand. Do you want to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help your black ass? Goddamn right. Why don't you tell everybody what the fuck you gotta say? Fuck the police coming straight from the young nigga got it brown. Yeah, we can go toe to toe in the middle of a sale. Fucking with me because I'm a teenager with a little bit of gold and a major. Searching my car, looking for the product. Thinking every nigga is selling narcotics. You ever see me in the pen, then me and Low Benzo rolling in the Benzo? See the police out of state, but when I finish, bring yellow tape. They off the scene of the slaughter, still full of bread and water. I don't know if it's bad or what. Such a nigga down and grab the snacks, and on the other hand, without a gun, going out for the white cop. Ice Cube will swarm. Motherfucker ain't no food in the form. That's because I'm from the CBT. Pump police are afraid of me, huh? A young nigga on the warpath. And when I finish, it's gonna be a bloodbath. Dying in LA. Yo, Dre, I got something to say.
So we unpack these lyrics and we unpack them realizing that the authenticity and the anger might have been lost if you were to switch it into quote unquote standard English. And then we examine, well, who gets to say or who gets to define what is actually standard? And how would folks' perception of the song have changed if they knew that Ice Cube and his friends were just frisked, thrown to the ground prior to them writing this song because the police misidentified them, right? Then we also look at this image of what five black men posted in this video. How do they look? Where are they? And what do these bars represent? And why do they have attitudes? What brought this attitude on? Remember, this is a response to something. This just doesn't exist out of out of nowhere. What were they responding to? And then another one that we look at. So Julius Malema, he is the leader of the EFF party in South Africa, and the AfriForum took him to court to try to ban him from singing this song. But this was a popular anti-apartheid song, and this again brings us to the point of who actually has the right to their own language when it could be perceived by someone else as being offensive.
When I'm sitting, when I'm trim, so fast, kitty, the boy, so fast, kitty, the daddy, kitty, 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 Sibram Kondo Alaye. Sibram Kondo Alaye. Shoot to kill. Kilawa. Shoot to kill. Nabasa. Kiss the poor. The father. Kiss the poor. Father.
Now, what's really wonderful about this song is how others try to define it, right? Kiss the Boer. Kiss the Boer actually is in response to the immorality clause or immorality law, where it was against the law and one could be killed for kissing a white person or a white person kissing a black person. The Boer is representative of an oppressive structure of capitalism, and shoot to kill isn't saying we're going to go out there and advocating for the death of farmers and of Boers, but it's saying, hey, listen, when you aggress me, when you come after me, then I am within my right to shoot to kill. And who would be offended by that? By someone saying that if you were to harm me, I want to bring equal harm to you, or if not more. So, what we look at is positionality through this song. And then I don't know if you know Beyonce's, but we're just going to watch a snippet of it. And these are the texts again that we use.
What happened at the New Orleans? Bitch, I'm back. I'm popular the man. It's corny with that Illuminati mess. Paparazzi catch my fly and my cocky fresh. I'm so reckless when I rock my Givenchy dress. I'm so possessive, so I rock his rock necklaces. My daddy Alabama, mama Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, make the sexy bounce. Hot sauce in my bag, swag, swag. Ooh, yeah.
So we'll stop there. So one of the most classic lines to me is when Beyonce says, I like my baby hair with baby hair and afros. I like my Negro nose with Jackson 5 nostrils. So she's pushing up against what is considered beautiful. No, I like my baby air, her baby air, my with a very black thing when we talk about, oh, yeah, baby hair. And then Jackson 5 nostrils, where Michael Jackson's nostrils were characteristically broader and characteristically associated with blackness. And so she pushes back against this idea that you need to have European features in order to be considered beautiful. And then she also pushes back against the idea that Black women do not get along. So this is her counter story where she's challenging what other folk are saying, again, asking you to tap into love by removing any type of preconceived notion or idea that you may have about Blackness. So to NWA, hey, listen, who F the police? Are all police officers bad? Are there some out there that are? Yes. Were they unfortunately affected by bad police officers? Yes. Was apartheid a brutal system of oppression? Yes. Should South Africans have fought back against it? Yes. Did they have to develop their own literacy in order to survive tough situations? Yes. And so we look at that. And very appropriately so, we look at Audre Lorde's that there is no hierarchy of oppression. We're all oppressive. One is oppressed, all of us. And then what happens through when people are indifferent? When you don't take a stand, and when you don't take a stand, what brings us to and I want to read this, and then wanna I want to let you go. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came from the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And that's what a literacy narrative does. It gives the marginalized voices. That's what an autoethnography does. It asks us to look at ourselves and our assumptions and our biases and how those assumptions and biases, how do they affect us, our teaching practice, and our research. And so it's important, like Elie Wiesel warns us, that we need to take a position and that being indifferent is siding actually with the oppressor. And students' response, so excuse the typo, rate the degree to which the statement is true. When we first were assigned a literacy narrative, I had very little understanding of what a literacy narrative is or was. Somewhat true, completely true. So most of my students had no idea before we began the course what a literacy narrative was, is, every last one of them multilingual students. And then rate the degree to which the following statement is true. Now that the literacy narrative is over, I have a better understanding of what a literacy narrative is. Check this out. More than This is like 80% of the students now understand, more than 80%, what a literacy narrative is versus when they first began. Check that out, just the same amount. So more than 80% didn't know, now 80% do know. I call that effective teaching. And so, what does this all mean? Africa, we we should never forget, never. And our literacy narrative brings us to places in our story where we might not have gone before. And this gentleman, he was a political prisoner in South Africa who slept on concrete flooring for wanting a better life. And I said I will forever tell his story. And he is now a guide at Robben Island where he was in prison. And in Dutch, they had, well, Afrikaans, they have white only, no blacks. And note here that I tried to do a contrast. And then remembering June 16th, where students were massacred for demanding not to speak in Afrikaans, but to be able to speak in English and or use their mother tongue in the classroom, and were slaughtered and gunned down for fighting for self-determination. And then also District 6, where you have a whole community of people who were displaced because you had colonizers come in and say that this land is ours, right? So, what does all of this mean? All of this means is that the work for self determination, the work for defining yourself and wanting to define yourself for yourself and fighting for your mother tongue, it is never over. And we should never give up the fight for self determination. So we all belong here. And I want to thank you so very much for your attention and for allowing me to give you my philosophy, which I have adopted, which is Ubuntu. And that means that through you, I am. So thank you so very much for your attention. And I wish you the best possible day. Thank you.